Hi, everybody, and welcome to the IBM Champions Chat. Today, we're going to be talking about blockchain with some of our amazing IBM champions. Before we get started, I just want to give you a little high level on what the IBM Champions program is. This is a program at IBM that recognizes not only the best and brightest technologists, but the ones that are driven to give back to the community. These are the ones you see speaking at conferences, writing blogs and articles and books. These are the ones that you see running user groups, answering questions in forums and community. And we gather them all together to build an even better and bigger community with them. So today we're going to be talking about blockchain, and I've got my co-host Luke Schantz. Luke, what makes you so excited to hear today from the champions on blockchain?
Well, what I'm excited about is I think we've gotten past that hype cycle moment, and now we're getting to what's the real deal, what's going on, how is this technology going to be used? And it's not, obviously a lot of people are interested in cryptocurrencies, but the real applications for enterprise go far beyond that. And I wanted to mention that I had the opportunity to interview one of the developer advocates, Horea, about blockchain, and it was our most popular episode of the IBM Developer Blockchain, podcast ever. I put the link here.
Awesome. That sounds really cool. So there's something that folks can watch after this when they want to know more and get some more stuff. That's great. All right, well, let's bring in Debbie Kasten-Schildkraut. Debbie is works with me to run the IBM Champions program for blockchain folks, but is also a blockchain expert in her own right. Hi, Debbie.
Hi, everyone. Happy to join you today.
Good to see you. Why don't you take a second to introduce yourself, and then we'll bring in all the champions.
Sure. Well, thrilled to be here. Blockchain is definitely one of my favorite topics. We have lots of incredible use cases. I think, as Luke was saying before, we've gotten to the point where we're really, getting more mature in the market. People, who thought blockchain was just for cryptocurrency are now starting to see that blockchain is so much more. And there's so many very interesting use cases. It's not an automatic solution for everyone, but when it comes to some unique needs where it involves, businesses and different entities needing to get together to share information in a tried, true, and trusted way, verifiable way. There's so many incredible use cases that are out there, from blockchain for social good and sustainability to construction to you name it. Anyway, so really thrilled as part of the Champions program to have some of our blockchain champions share some of their insights with you today. And we hope you'll have fun with us.
I know. I'm so excited. Let me just, before we bring all the champions in, let me remind everybody that wherever it is that you're watching us live, this is your opportunity to drop questions in the chat. We're keeping an eye on those different chats, and we will bring those questions or those comments or those ideas here to our experts. So with no more ado, let's bring in the champions. I feel like we should be playing some music here, but
I know.
I don't have the rights to all the music, so, All right, Nick, Frank, Karen, Jason, good to see you all. I'd love to have you guys introduce yourselves. Nick, why don't we start with you?
Okay. Well, thank you for having me today. I'm very excited to be here. My name is Nick Kammerman. I am the Director of Business Development for Chateau Software. We're located in Norwalk, Connecticut. We are an applications consulting firm. We specialize in mobile and web applications, analytics, data warehousing, e-commerce sites, very traditional applications. And over the last few years, we've gotten heavily into the blockchain space, and we've done a number of projects in conjunction with IBM. And we're very excited to talk about it today.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. Frank, why don't you go ahead and go next?
I'm Frank Blau. I'm currently in Western Austria, which is about as far away from Vienna as you can get. I actually work in the tiny little principality of Liechtenstein, which is about 20 minutes from where I live here in Dornbirn, Austria. And I'm primarily a data architect working in the operations department of a fintech startup called Area to Invest. And we're basically a platform for investors So it's both traditional, but also a lot of crypto stuff also. It's a pretty interesting space to be in right now. I've been doing blockchain since forever, it seems like. I'm the person that took Libby's challenge to describe blockchain in less than 2 minutes, and I think I succeeded. So my claim to fame.
3.5, actually, Frank.
3.5. Okay,
3.5. But it was still, it was spectacular. We're going to come back to that in a minute because I want to see what you've grown in your understanding or explanation of blockchain from when you did that. But
super. That's me. So.
We're glad to have you. Karen, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, sure. I'm Karen Kilroy. I'm CEO of Kilroy Blockchain here in Austin, Texas. And Kilroy Blockchain was the North America winner of the IBM Watson Build Challenge in 2017 for our artificial intelligence app called Riley. We've been, as our name indicates, we're heavy into blockchain. We've focused on enterprise blockchain applications. Right now, we are working on supply chain blockchain projects, as well as our own blockchain case management system for COVID-19 case management. Thank you.
I think
that's awesome.
A really cool thing that we're going to talk about more on this live stream.
I know. I'm so excited. And part of what led to my wanting to do this was Jason too has been talking about the aspects of COVID-19 and blockchain that kind of work together and some ideas around that. Jason, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you for having me. So I'm Jason Giuliano. I'm the CEO for Ponia Data. I'm out of New York. So I have roughly around 25 years as a technology and risk management executive for Fortune 50 firms before I started Aponia roughly around 6-7 years ago. So we're a solutions integrator related to AI solutions, blockchain, intelligence, automation. We started going into creating risk management algorithms for quantum computing models. But we also have a cognitive integrated risk management solution embedded with Watson, which we actually got second place in 2018 for the Watson Build competition. Currently, we're actually working with New Jersey hospitals on a prototype integrating a AI-enabled blockchain solution for hospitals to create a digital ledger to make sure the issue right now that hospitals are having is that with the Charity Care Act, they only get reimbursed for roughly a third of the charity care cases that uninsured patients can't pay for, and most of those are COVID related. So, to protect that, we're building a trust and transparent blockchain solution enabled with Watson Assistant and some other Watson services to basically solve that problem.
Very cool. Very cool. Awesome. So the way we're going to work today is we've got some questions, and I know my champions have some conversation. So we'll just sort of, work through that. But again, let me remind everybody that if you're watching on Twitch, if you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Facebook, we are keeping track of those chats as well. So feel free to drop your questions for our experts in there. So I think one of the things that I'm interested in, and I've heard a little bit about that from some of your introductions, but what was it that actually made you say, blockchain, I'm going to do it? Did you have a particular project, or was it just something that was interesting to you? Do you want to start out on that one, Frank, and tell us, since you're my basics person to begin with?
So I've been a database architect for 25, 30 years. So I've always sort of been around sort of advanced data technology topics. I did some IBM Streams work, which is when I met Libby the first time. So I've always been sort of interested in like how data functions. And the first time I heard blockchain described to me, I was like, whoa, like my head just like went, I've never heard of anything like that before. And can this work? And of course we were all very skeptical, and it was all tied up with Bitcoins, but I very quickly sort of became sort of the beyond the Bitcoins person, like to understand the design pattern that we were talking about. And so that's sort of how I came to it. I've been through, supply chain work. I've done a little bit of medical work. I've done a little bit of just event processing stuff, also some IoT stuff with blockchain. So a lot of education work also with students from little kids, who are actually the best, all the way up to university level, actually, at the University of St. Gallen in Switzerland. So that's kind of how I got here. Nick, you want to try?
There's a really fun little video that I posted on LinkedIn, Frank, this past week of, I think it's a 10-year-old girl, and if you've seen this.
No.
Describing blockchain. Have you seen that?
That sounds awesome. I'll have to
It's
check
hilarious.
it out.
She's like with her dad in the store, and she just like starts saying, she starts describing how a ledger can track, the whole methodology of how stuff got to the store. And he's looking at her like she's like nuts. And it's really cute. And then it flips into like a cartoon version, and then back to real life. And it's just a fun little, it reminded me of you because you did have that video where you described blockchain like in a few minutes, except it was a 10-year-old girl version of
Great. You're making it so much better.
So you'll have to check it out.
Yeah, well, in Europe, they have these things called Sparbooks, which are like your little, your passbook when you had a savings account, And I just always refer to blockchain as the magic Sparbook, so.
That's
people
awesome.
Are going to tend to get that, so.
Yeah.
So Nick, what turned you and your company onto blockchain? What was your first sort of aha moment?
Well, it's kind of interesting. As I mentioned, Chateau has been around for over 30 years doing, other applications consulting work. And about 3 or 4 years ago, we actually had a couple of our developers and architects were crypto miners. And they had servers in their basements, and they were running up their electric bills like there was no tomorrow. And that was a bit of an aha moment for, our senior solutions architect said that this is a technology that really is groundbreaking and something we should be getting involved with. So we were already an IBM partner from years ago, but we were able to kind of reignite our partnership and kind of step in and help out with some of the projects that IBM maybe wasn't tackling, because they spend a lot of their resources and energy is focused on Food Trust and some of the larger ones, TradeLens. So we were able to kind of work with IBM, use our partnership and say, hey, we have these capabilities to take an MVP, to take an idea and go from beginning to end. Because we have that traditional application side, we were able to do the front end, we were able to do a lot of the analytics and the back end, and then adding the blockchain layer on there was what made all of our projects really appealing and kind of very interesting to folks. On top of that, once we started kind of getting into that and getting a few projects out there, True Tickets is one that I know a lot of people may have heard of. I actually was appointed the chairman of the Connecticut Blockchain Working Group, which was set up by the Commerce Committee in the state of Connecticut. The goal is to put in place legislation that makes it appealing for folks to do this type of work, distributed ledger work in the state of Connecticut. So we were trying to, make smart contracts legally binding and different areas that you can't just say, hey, blockchain is now, legal, or blockchain is now the thing to do. So that's really helped give us a lot of exposure. And then I think working with small to mid-sized companies with, as I said, the ability to kind of come in and do that soup to nuts development has made us, I think, an appealing partner and appealing to companies that, are in that startup stage and are looking to have a blockchain application. That's where we can kind of step in and help a lot, because we have that experience with the small companies and the hand-holding from the beginning to the end.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, all of it's interesting, but one of the things that I caught there was, the working group and making contracts that are based on blockchain, legally binding. And Karen, if I'm not mistaken, that's something that you work on in Texas. You're in the working group convened by the state in Texas, right?
Yeah, I have another hat that I wear as the CIO of the Texas Blockchain Council. And you can look us up online, texasblockchaincouncil.com. And we are a group of companies in Texas that are working to present the logic of use cases to the Texas legislature. And anyone in Texas is welcome to join us. And we help you get a voice in front of the decision makers.
I think that's key, right? Just defining what the right use case is, because there's a lot of noise around blockchain, but when organizations try to define what blockchain is, they don't really have the right use case. I mean, you just really have to wrangle them in and say, well, this is more for peer-to-peer, creating a transparent ledger, and really defining the use case with them where they could utilize as a competitive advantage for their business and industry.
Yeah, definitely true.
Yeah, I think that now that what Libby said earlier about us sort of getting over the hype cycle a little bit, or was it Nick that said that? Someone said that.
I think we've all said it now.
I think that's what's most interesting to me right now is that I don't have to walk into the room and be a freak. Well, I still do, but it comes naturally to me.
But not about blockchain.
Exactly. But the idea that you can actually, these are now business development conversations. These are no longer, who's the freak with the Raspberry Pi, it actually is very literal. And it's actually, there are people that deal exclusively with front ends now and exclusively with back ends. And it's kind of like it's moved into the software world in a really cool way. So I like that.
Absolutely.
And one thing I'd like to just throw in there, I see blockchain as it's like a utility that tells a story, and the story that it tells keeps honest people honest. It's a deterrent. It helps to remove temptation, because if the blockchain is tampered with, someone will know it. It's able to be detected. So I just wondered, what your thoughts are on that. Are you seeing I know our topic here was along the lines of blockchain, revealing what actually happens, the truth forever, right? So if that's the case, and let's say, I'm a treasurer and I'm in charge of, a $5 million fund, and, it's tempting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm barely making ends meet. And this happens all the time, like in school districts and places like that. And blockchain, once it becomes everywhere, I think that we'll see that temptation start to go away, because people will know they'll be caught.
I think if I can add to that, there's a lot of kind of buzzwords and little lines that sort of describe and kind of picking up what Karen said. One of the ways I've heard blockchain described, and a lot of it, I see it a lot within the supply chain area, is trusting the transaction when you can't always trust the people that are involved in the transaction. Mm-hmm. And it may not be that you don't trust them because they're up to no good. It may be that you don't trust them because you don't know them, or they're further along down the line of a supply chain, or any kind of digital asset that's moving through a chain of custody. And blockchain, because of like what Karen said, that historical immutability allows people to trust that the transaction that they're being part of, whether it's a transaction for a cryptocurrency, or the next step in a supply chain, or buying some sort of digital asset, you can trust the transaction even if you don't necessarily trust the people that you're working with. And I think that's what blockchain, at its core, gives you, is that trust.
Yeah,
I refer to remember we used to talk about semi-trusted relationships as being sort of one of the key differentiators for blockchain. And when I worked in supply chain, we referred to them as semi-hostile relationships. You got like, truckers from different sides of the country that hate each other, and things like that. And they'll steal each other's loads and things like that. There's a lot of, the whole port management thing is just a crazy, crazy space. But I would also remind, there's a quote from another IBM champion in the Netezza space. That shows you how old I am. David Birmingham. He says that the truth is version controlled. So yes, we do have the truth, but the truth is version controlled. But that's one of the things that that blockchain definitely brings to the table too.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point.
Yeah, currently we work with a lot of accounting firms, and they're all saying that this is actually going to redefine the way they do audits in the future, especially when the regulators get tied into these peer-to-peer networks.
Exactly. And that's one of the things we're hoping to accomplish in Texas with the Texas Blockchain Council is we also have the Texas Blockchain Service Network, where we're standing up a network. We're working with Hedera Hashgraph and standing up a network for the state of Texas. So anyone that has interest in doing business in Texas and using blockchain, it's almost like we'll have an infrastructure for that. And of course, we're working with IBM as well. And then that also ties in with the regulators. We want the regulators at the same time to see, look, you can proactively encourage compliance by building the laws themselves into smart contracts. Yeah. And so we want to try to take that baby steps of, okay, now we're going to educate folks on here's how you can keep people honest.
Yeah, I would actually recommend, if that's the scope that you're looking at, sort of at a regulatory level, whether it's the state level or whatever, Liechtenstein has been very forward-thinking with their blockchain law, and they have what's called the Liechtenstein Blockchain Act now, and it's a full rights-driven model that layers really nicely on top of Liechtenstein's already strong legal and regulatory framework. And it's all translated into English too. The guy's name is Thomas Negle, who's done a lot of work in that space. I can post some links to his work, but the first time I saw it, I was just blown away at how comprehensive it was, because it really trying to do something that is essentially decentralized in a centralized way. I mean, that's kind of the conflict that a lot of us are in right now is yeah, you can do a lot of really cool stuff with blockchain if you just don't do it like in a blockchain way or something, But the work that they're doing in Liechtenstein was passed unanimously by their Congress. Of course, Liechtenstein only has 40,000 people or something like that. But so it's a really interesting sort of framework that they're trying to get adopted. Being in the EU, you have lots of countries with a lot of different interests, and getting that resolved, being able to do business together is really a critical part of this blockchain space right now, I think.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you thought that would help, from an EU perspective, Liechtenstein's small enough to test the waters and kind of show.
Yeah, but it's still like Germany does things one way, Liechtenstein does things another, and of course Austria does it by putting cheese on top of it. No, I'm sorry. No, we were joking earlier in the preamble about Austrians always put cheese on everything. But every Austria has a blockchain council too. And it's like, okay, now can we start talking together a little bit? And of course I'm working in Liechtenstein now, so I'm sort of pretty more familiar with that. But it's a pretty interesting space, the regulatory space right now.
Yeah, definitely. The regulatory space is, I think, the most, conservative, of course. And, and we were having a conversation at work the other day about that, even with some of the cloud implementations, how they really want everything controlled, on premise. And but blockchain can be on an on-premise server too, I mean, we really want it on the cloud, but
I think one of the issues that trips up a lot of the regulatory stuff is that in Europe you have very different banking laws, and from country to country it differs very much. Whereas in America you can kind of go around. Yeah, there's some state level stuff, but really, if you're doing business with banks in America, you're kind of doing business with banks in America. Whereas here it's like, oh, you can do business with that bank, but not that bank. And of course we also have laws around KYC, know your customer, that you don't have in America also. Which is funny that I'm working for this crypto investing company and I can't do any of it because I'm an American. I'm like, oh, you're an American, sorry, we don't deal with you. Your tax laws are too complicated, So it's a little crazy.
Wow. So we're getting some questions about use cases in the chat, and we are going to actually talk about a lot of different use cases, I think, throughout this conversation here. So I don't know. We could jump right into that and move around. We've got some other questions, but do any of you want to kind of talk about, I'd say, the most meaningful use case that you're right in the middle of, or something that you feel like just really has helped, really click from a blockchain perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take that one on the project that we're working on currently. So as I stated before, a lot of New Jersey hospitals reported with the charity care subsidies around only a third getting reimbursed by the government. These are in the millions by, by separate hospital entity. So that alone, roughly if you engage into a peer-to-peer blockchain network, your costs, let's say they're, a little south of $1 million, right there, you're probably saving, roughly around 600%. So that's a good return on investment because of the losses on charity care reimbursement from the government. And those losses apply back to audit where they can't really apply that specific fees against charity care. So the government is like, well, this could be disputed, so it's not approved for reimbursement.
So from a blockchain perspective, oh, sorry, does we have a question?
No, I just said it was cool.
Yeah. So how is that working right now? Like, are you primarily working with the hospitals or the insurance companies, or I guess the hospitals? Like, how is that kind of blockchain convening?
We're really working with some hospitals and with Rutgers University on the data sets. Okay. And we're, the portal that we're creating, we're capturing from patient care in the beginning to all the way until it gets booked back to that charity care subsidy grant.
And is it a hard sell, or is it like, oh, great, you've got something that can help make this?
It's an easy sell. The issue is that we have to get people to understand is the HIPAA, where the public perception is that my data is going to be out there, but the whole premise of blockchain is that the patient has full control of what data gets sent to whom.
Mm-hmm.
We had a follow-up question. Sorry, Frank, one sec. We had a follow-up question to the use case that you're talking about, Jason. One of our folks is wanting to know kind of what the difference is between that use case and just a trusted third party that maintains a database of that information. Or is this how you build that trusted third party relationship?
This is how you build it, because you could tie in an insurance company, you tie in the patient through a patient portal, you could tie in the feds if they wanted to integrate into this, and everyone could see the transaction that they actually have access to. So you have that full trusted ledger from point A to Z.
And really, if you didn't have that, it would be hard, I think, to build just a database, a static, not necessarily static, but one person containing the whole database, because you need so many different pieces to contribute into it. Am I kind of understanding it right?
That's correct. And then you also have, the issues related to the whole crypto blockchain, right? So you can hack, wherever database that is, whether it's a internal or external hack. It could, if one company is controlling this, who's to say, in terms of best practices, if they're performing best practice security measures, where you put in a blockchain, everyone has a piece of that transaction, and you can track it again from point A to Z.
Makes perfect sense.
I think in the things that I've seen in that, just a quick touch on that, is that I get that question all the time. Why not just a API, right? Why not just a database, And the point is that the database is still a single point of failure. It's still a single point of attack for anyone who wants your information. And we've learned how to harden and secure these things, but the nice thing about blockchain is like, it's almost, I won't say it's not a concern, but it's a much lower level concern. It's a different level of the architecture the concern is. And so I feel really strongly that like it keeps that out of it in a good way.
You also empower the patient to provide what they're going to provide access to and to whom, and at what, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. There was one in Liechtenstein that was similar. It was for life cycle of cars. From manufacturing all the way through to recycling and destruction. And so your whole repair, your insurance, life cycle basically of a car they're creating smart contracts around. It's really interesting because it's like, oh, yeah, that sort of fits. Yeah, and again, it's one of those things where you would ask the question, like, okay, could I do this with a database? Yeah, but I'd miss out on all the cool things that I can, like you said, control what I share. Like, what do I want to share with my mechanic versus my insurance agent? Why should I have to go to 3 different systems to do that? I should have the same permissioned network that allows me to control that information. So I think that's really cool thing about blockchain.
And then that it's tamper evident. I think that's probably the biggest thing to me. Is that, if any one of the parties that don't necessarily really trust each other tries to change something, it'll be evident to everyone else in the network.
Yeah.
One of the, I had mentioned it before and kind of picking up where Karen said about tampering, one of the interesting projects that we worked on is something called True Tickets. And True Tickets is a event and concert or sporting event online ticketing platform that resides on your phone, and your phone becomes the digital wallet, the ticket becomes the digital asset, and what happens is it allows the users to fight against scalpers and fraud, because there is no ability to go on there and use a ticket bot, buy 1,000 different tickets, mark the price up 500%. This allows you to own the ticket on your phone. That's how you get in, which moving forward, this touchless world that we're going to be entering, where we don't want to be actually handing people hard copy tickets. And I've had friends that have gone to StubHub and bought tickets to a basketball game. They print out the PDF and they're told that they're about the 100th person to try to walk in using that ticket. True Tickets obviously prevents that from happening. It allows that touchless transaction to get in. And it also allows a lot of different other little features, such as who's actually sitting in the concert or at the sporting event for marketing purposes. You can allow the artist or the team to actually get a little piece of that transaction after it happens, because you can imagine if you buy a concert ticket online from StubHub or something like that, the artist was paid that initial time for that $50 ticket. I bought the ticket for $200 and the scalper made the $150. The artist made none of that money. And True Tickets, because you are tracking this digital asset as it moves through this chain of custody, I can sell it back to True Tickets, and then Frank can go on there and buy it, and I can only mark it up a certain amount, whichever has been agreed upon. So if I'm only allowed to mark it up 10%, I can't mark it up 1,000%. And then you could even kind of cut out a piece to have that artist actually get some of that money as well. And it allows a much more control and trust for this transaction, which is an industry that is just fraught with fraud and scalpers and fraudulent tickets. So
what we're doing with our Casey case management system is similar in the aspect of, we have a product that's called Casey Survey. And I don't know if you've been to anywhere, the dentist, the hairdresser, anywhere. They ask you a bunch of questions, and sometimes they'll hand you a piece of paper. Sometimes there's a piece of paper laying there with some disinfected pens. Well, what we have built is Casey allows the shop to put in an iPad. The shopkeeper can fill it out for them, and then the information that's collected goes directly into blockchain, and then there's another piece of Casey that the health department uses, a dashboard where they can log directly in and retrieve that information on who signed in on a particular day, only in the event of an outbreak, for use in contact tracing. And we're in the IBM mentorship program right now, and we're just starting down the journey of packaging up our application that we already have built, but we're packaging it up as a SaaS for the IBM Cloud. So
nice, very cool.
Thank you. It's kind of made me think of it because of the ticketing. It's similar, where you're signing in and then you do some things, right? But it's basically a ticket type.
Is anyone
so
else?
I want to follow.
Go right ahead.
Let me hang on one sec. I want to actually dive deeper into Karen's use case here, but I want to go ahead and real quick ask a question from Twitch that follows up on what Nick asked, or what Nick was telling us. We've got a user saying, can I opt out of that marketing use case? So one aspect of the use case that you were talking about, without trusting the venue, without trusting the service, like how would that work?
Well, so obviously each venue or artist or theater can set the rules, right? They have the ability to set the rules onto, what's visible to the public, what's visible to the people who are running the actual event, the amount of the ticket price and how much you can mark it up. So there are options for to be removed from the marketing side of things, but keep in mind, the goal of the actual product is so that we know that Nick is the person in the concert with the real ticket. So
Right.
I understand if you don't want to receive information, and yes, there are opt-outs for that. We don't want to receive emails or texts, but the idea of knowing, now you could certainly have your digital wallet private so that it doesn't necessarily say Nick Cameraman is the person in there. I could be, a 16-digit hash that goes in there.
Right.
But the idea would be that it is unique to me and my phone. So you don't want to take away too much of that aspect, because then it sort of loses that ability to track the fact that this is the true ticket and the real ticket
Right.
to get in there.
Right. It's got to be
funny 'cause
transparent.
In the fintech world, we actually have the exact opposite problem, is that from a regulatory standpoint, there's information we have to collect before
Right.
you can move forward, So a lot of the parts of our process are give us X, Y, and Z. And we actually have, for example, like video identification processes that you have to go through before you can buy products. And so it's kind of what I was saying at the beginning, where we, this whole world grew out of kind of this libertarian ethos of, I want to own my own stuff, and now we're talking about, hey, if you want to play in my blockchain world, you got to, share a little bit more information with me. And in the securities world and tokenized securities, you just can't do it anonymously. It's at least not in Europe, it's very much about identity too. So
yeah, and I think, along those lines, one of the things with True Tickets, I know you had another question, Libby, but you don't want to, you want to have some sense that it is me, and I mean truly me walking into that concert, because yes, and I say it's marketing, and I immediately people think, well, now I'm going to be bombarded with emails and things, but a lot of it also allows you the opportunity to do a lot of private events. Very recently, Lady Gaga did something. It was a dive bar tour, and she literally, it was only available to her fan club and her private fans, and blockchain was not used for that. True Tickets was not used for that, but that is a great use case for them to specifically target her fan base and know that this person is truly one of her big fans, and that's why they have the ability to walk in with this ticket, and it won't be scalped for thousands of dollars to go to this very cool private show at a small bar kind of thing.
Yeah,
That is very cool use,
I
actually.
see that a little bit with ticketing here, actually, not so much done on blockchain, but trying to create anti-scalping. I had tickets, of course, it was canceled because of COVID, for Pearl Jam in Zurich. And the tickets are like, this ticket can only be used by Frank Blau, who has this ID, blah, blah, blah. It's very much, tied to you, which is great for the artist, actually. It's great for the anti-scalping thing, too. But might not appeal to everybody, but I certainly like knowing that I still have like 2 tickets on my refrigerator for whenever that concert happens again, and I'm not going to go somewhere else, So,
well, it's funny because that was one of the big complaints about the actual, not a big complaint, but one of the things that people initially said was, I really love having the ticket stub.
yeah.
And, I went to see the Who in 1987, whatever it is, and I have the stub for it. Well, you don't have that anymore.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So I want to now kind of go back into this other thing, and Debbie, feel free to chime in to frame this question. We had talked about COVID and all the aspects of that as being maybe an inflection point for blockchain. And Karen, just kind of talking about the contact tracing, gave us one possible reason for that. Debbie, do you want to kind of expand on your thoughts around that? Then we can see what the panelists think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, clearly the COVID-19 is having impacts to all businesses in a variety of ways. And some people are saying, like, now blockchain's time has come. I mean, if you think about all the supply chain challenges this year with, the lack of PPE, being where it was needed, and, how do you find the PPE, and how do you get the quantities that you need and the secure and reliable, supplies that you need and where you need to have them. And as just one of many examples, the contact tracing is another. So, I just thought it would be really interesting for us and people reviewing and listening to us, if you can share kind of your observations that you've each had around kind of COVID and blockchain as the potential, what challenges have your clients faced, and how is blockchain technology helping?
Could I start?
Please.
Okay. I've really studied all the COVID stuff. I've gotten 2 certifications from Johns Hopkins as a contact tracer, and then also to study the impact of a contact tracing program. And I know you mentioned supply chain, a lot of other areas, and I agree with all those, but I think that we can't overlook the direct role that blockchain can take in actually mitigating the outbreaks and controlling the spread of COVID. I mean, we have a chance here to prove what blockchain can do. And my company has been digging into this for like the past 5 months. And what we have found is that, I think Jason mentioned, I think it was Jason that mentioned that, it's the blockchain network that actually brings the various players together. Right, these may be groups that weren't working together, and in the instance of Casey, which is our case management system, you have government money, right, for blockchain, for not for blockchain, but for contact tracing and case management. Then you have groups that are set up that are nonprofit groups that are designed to put people to work. That's what they're for, is to train people and put people to work. So you have cities, municipalities, areas, schools, you name it, that need to have contact tracing done. So I believe that blockchain can be used to marry all these folks together, the case managers with the contact tracers, with the funding, with the need to get it done. And that's our approach for Casey.
So IBM also has IBM Health Pass blockchain, which takes care
Health Pass blockchain. Okay.
Yeah, which takes care of the case management piece, and then we created something called CARA, which is our COVID action response assistant. So that's basically a chatbot that we could put on any institutional's website, but we also enabled it for voice, so you can actually call either 732 number or 800 number and speak to Watson directly. We saw that as a good complement into the prototype we're creating, hospital associations. But in addition, integrating that into Health Pass, because Health Pass is taking care of, okay, where are the testing facilities located at? What pharmacies are providing, medications if I am exposed or my immune system is down? Am I, able to go back to school again? Am I able to go back to work again? And, basically allowing educational institutions to tie into Health Pass, allowing employers to tie into it, allowing, regular citizens to tie into that. So that's where that power comes in. But the first entry point is, providing that virtual assistant, chatbot on an organization's website, even, state health agencies could have it on their site, and they could basically integrate directly into Health Pass from that first starting point via the chatbot.
That's really cool. One of the things that I was thinking about while you were talking is that, disclosure, I was a literature major, so, I talk about metaphor and stuff like that all the time. And one of the things that's really interesting is that, I think we can all admit this is probably the craziest year of our lives. I mean, that's pretty much a given for most people I know. And but to me, I see that as this great opportunity for disruption. Disruption's basically been handed to us, whereas before it was always this battle. And like when I hear Karen describe what she's building, I'm like, God, it just makes perfect sense, Now, obviously, I'm in Europe. The regulatory framework around healthcare is very different. But the thing that has really struck me about how COVID is being impacted with blockchain is that they match in a strange way, right? It's borderless, it's decentralized, it's viral, it's the impacts aren't really known about what we're doing. We're taking a lot of risks in some cases, and it doesn't make me feel better all the time, but it definitely makes me think, this world this sort of post-COVID world feels more like a blockchain world to me. I can't really completely explain it, but it feels like there's opportunities there for this narrative of, hey, you know what? You need a borderless, stateless, cryptographically signed system for doing something now, and blockchain just does that. It's like it doesn't even require. I mean, when I tell people, look, I can set you up a hyperledger network to do a smart contract and give me 40 minutes. You know what I mean? It's like, and people don't believe me, but then you do it, and they're just like, oh my God, this is not the rocket science. The rocket science to what we do is in deployment, it's in scale, it's in all the other crazy and being compliant. But I feel like a weird match between the world that COVID is creating for us and the world that we are actually able to do stuff with in blockchain that traditional centralized land-based databases just don't solve.
It's funny. I had a CIO say to me 6 months ago. He said, he's really interested in blockchain. It sounds very cool, but it always just seems like a solution looking for a problem. And then, ironically, about a month later, you had mentioned Jerry Cuomo earlier, Libby, and we were on a call, and Jerry said something to the effect of, this event that we're all experiencing right now is really what blockchain was created for. Yeah. And kind of, piggybacking on what Frank had said, we are all decentralized now, right? We are all in this world where very few people are all of a sudden, coming into their office and connecting to that server in the closet over there. We're all spread out. I mean, even on this call right now, I mean, Frank is in Europe, and people are all over the country, and yet, blockchain allows us to all of a sudden sort of be very connected and still safe, right? Because it's not this just open network where anybody can kind of come on there and take a look and take what they want. So I think, to go back to the CIO who said that blockchain was a solution looking for a problem, and then teaming that with what Frank said, unfortunately, the problem has been
handed to us.
The solution seems to be blockchain. So it's maybe it's coming along at the right time. So.
Yeah, I think one of the questions you had asked, Libby, in your pre-questions was sort of like, what are the challenges around what COVID has done to us? And I think that the biggest thing that I see is that, yeah, we understand the infrastructure is going to be blockchain. We understand decentralization is key. The problem is like, okay, concert tickets. There are no freaking concerts, you know what I mean? There are no freaking events, it's like, and so it's kind of like finding a map now to those use cases is different. It's not just like I can talk about the whole business anymore, because if your business is tourism, a year ago, I would have been talking to you about ticketing, and I would have been talking to you about, ski lift tickets and, all sorts of really cool stuff like that. No one is going to fund anything in that space right now. Even in the investment world that I'm in right now, people are very conservative, and that's a hurdle we're going to have to get over by proving, to Karen's point, proving that this stuff does this stuff, in the way that we say it does.
And I just have a little plug for IBM Blockchain, and this came from my CTO, Deepak Barta, who is very, very picky. And it came down to, okay, we're doing this project. We're going to have to open up the wallets. Time to get the money out. I said, Deepak, do we really need IBM Blockchain? Can't you do this in Hyperledger? And I will share with you Deepak's answer. So I think we need IBM Blockchain, because we need to work in the infrastructure level. This means we have to create organizations, channels, and nodes dynamically through code. So when someone subscribes to our case management system, all that stuff's got to happen by itself in the background. He says if we decide to go with Hyperledger Fabric, then our journey may be far more difficult to address the infrastructure part.
Yeah, he's hit on some really good points, because I mean, look, like the open source is great because it's giving so much accessibility to so many people who want to work with the technology. But the difference of moving to IBM Blockchain platform is making it enterprise grade ready, right? It's got the scalability, the tools, the support, the security, all of those kinds of things that really need to come into play once you're going to try to scale that solution. So
yeah, one of the selling points that I've made for blockchain with a lot of my peer groups here is that, look, not everything's going to be a blockchain, but I'll tell you what, I can model anything on a blockchain. If you think you have a transaction that you want to create for some purpose, build a smart contract and try it. See if it works. See where it falls apart. See if you have the right data payloads. See if you have the right, if you're doing the minimum you need to get to get this transaction accomplished. What you actually landed on at the end of the day may be something as sophisticated as IBM Blockchain or something as simple as Hyperledger. But get into doing it this way is really what I try and convince people to do. Get into writing smart contracts as part of your automated test plan, for example, to test out ideas. Yeah. And getting people excited about that is something that I try and do.
It seems like, to Nick's point earlier, with the ticket, we're now in a touchless environment, and the point about being decentralized and us being all over that you were making before, it is making me think that smart contracts are going to really come into their own now. There's been a lot of caution around it, but I don't know. What do you guys think? I feel like the time maybe has come. Like we're at the tipping point.
I have something to say about that. I think that, I've been in IT forever, right? I've worked in IT departments in and out for 30 years. And a lot of times once projects aren't exciting, they get thrown to IT, right? Okay, we've eaten the frosting off the top of the cupcake, and now here you guys do it. You guys blockchain now, we're done. And this isn't going to happen with blockchain because of smart contracts. Smart contracts are a living, breathing business agreement, and they'll never be able to wrap it up and throw it off to IT. So it's a commitment from the entire business. And I think that's what really makes it different than other projects. And I think it will live on once the right people learn it.
So I could just sit here and listen to you guys talk about this because you're making me think so many good thoughts. No, I mean, it's, I like to be challenged to think a little bit, but we do have quite a few questions that have come in between our couple of platforms. So I want to pull some of those in real quick in our last 10 minutes or so. So one of our champions, hi Hitesh, is actually on YouTube, and he's kind of asking a couple of questions around ROI. If the key question of ROI is people kind of come in, they put their pennies in on, kind of early exploration, figuring out what they want to do with it, how do you help them kind of climb that wall into realizing the full ROI?
I think it's going to be similar to a workflow, any workflow project. We've been, this isn't anything new. We've been doing this for 30 some years with Lotus Notes and then with web workflow applications. So the ROI is just the same. In the case of case management, how much money are you going to save every year on toner and paper? Because right now they're faxing them.
Yeah.
The
piece of ROI that you don't want to forget is that the way that we're doing things now doesn't get away from that. So always, how do you get them to climb that wall? The same way you do with any other project is you get them to focus on the business questions. You get them to focus. It's I don't like people thinking that blockchain is so foreign that you can't have business conversations around it, And when I talk to my customers, when I talk to people who have ideas, I talk to a lot of people that have ideas, and I say, great, tell me what 500 transactions you're going to run in your application. Let's say you're an e-commerce app. Enumerate all your transactions, and then we will talk about where blockchain fits. We will talk about which ones of those are suitable. I always use kind of weird language, like I want to find out which ones smell like blockchain to me, because they aren't all going to. And actually, the percentage of ones that do might actually be small, but the ones that do, like your contact tracing one, or anything around supply chain, port management, they fit like a glove, and you can just see that light go on in people's eyes that, wow, it really isn't right to do this in a database for this reason. Cryptographically signed, consensus, is just like the coolest idea. But you still have to always bring the conversation back to what questions are you asking? We do not get away from that. We need to still, in our hearts, even though we're the crazy blockchain people, in our hearts, we still need to ask good business decisions. And that's how I able to climb that wall. Like, fintech, you're buying stuff. What do you care what the back end is, right? You're investing in something, and so the conversations are around the business case for it.
I think that's really important what Frank just said, that people, and it's funny, we talked about the hype curve earlier on, and I think Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies really brought blockchain into the forefront and got people talking about it, and it became very exciting. But I think what a lot of people expect is, and to pick up something Jason Kelly said, he's a IBM GBS blockchain guy. He says people expect us to just sort of walk in and sprinkle a little blockchain on top of your project or our bucket of blockchain. And it's an underlying technology. It's not necessarily something that is going to be something so cool to play with. I think at its core, it is really cool. Like, it's really neat the way what it does and its functionality, but it's not something that most people are going to use or see or 5 years from now even know that you're touching on. It'll just be there. And I think there's a lot of technologies out there over the years that we use every day, on our phones or on our laptops, that I don't know enough about the underlying technology. I just know that I can call someone or I can use my finger to scroll around through different apps. How that happens is sort of irrelevant to me. And I think blockchain got this unfair hype because of Bitcoin. It was great because it did bring it out to the public, but it also kind of set expectations for people that they were going to have the ability to use this thing in all these really cool ways, whereas they just won't even know they're using it. And I think that's sort of really important for a lot of people to understand, because they expect it to be something that it doesn't necessarily have to be, in terms of this cool play with it type of technology. It's underlying, it's background.
I use the language of design patterns, actually. That's how I describe blockchain. Whenever anybody describes it as a technology, I almost kind of cringe a little bit, because to me, it's a design pattern, and and as a design pattern, it has a use case,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not for everything. It's like, to me, like, my other love is graph databases, and it's like, graph databases don't fit everywhere, but when they do fit, they fit perfectly. And that's something I really feel about blockchain too. Is like, talk about it, spin it around, throw some spaghetti at the wall and see. And then when you find that thing that fits that use case, like when I saw the guys doing the fingerprint recognition for trucks in the port of Rotterdam, I was like, damn, you nailed it. It was like perfect. Like, I can't think of a better use case. Well, I probably could, but that's the kind of things I look for. And just like with graph databases, if you're not doing, peer-to-peer analysis of, nodes and relationships, you might as well just build a relational database. But if you are, boom. And that's the way I feel where blockchain is right now. We're kind of in that boom space of people are starting to come up with things that actually do fit it perfectly. And that's really cool.
Yeah, going back to the question, what I see a lot of people miss and looking at the ROI is the soft costs with looking at the full, supply chain with reputational costs, right? So, from a food trust perspective, if, a distribution center, has a case of Ebola, trying to stop that and know exactly where that's happening and tying it down to, maybe a container or something along those lines with, anything regarding supply chain, where there may be delays because of overseas shipment, and just getting ahead at it where you're reducing your overall reputational costs.
I know we're almost out of time, and I just want to throw in, please read my book. If you Google Kilroy O'Reilly, you can read my book for free, and it's everything that I know about blockchain as a service.
That's awesome. I also see
in 70 pages.
So I think, let me just...
There's somebody named Tommy who's got some IoT questions, and tell him to just hit me up. I'd love to talk about them.
I definitely will, and I'll grab the links if those chats are still available after, and share them all with you, because I know we don't have time to get to all the questions that you guys put in our Twitch and our YouTube and our Facebook, but I'm so glad that you all were out there asking them. Before we close, we're kind of at the top of the hour, so I know we want to wrap things up. Debbie has kind of a let's bring it all back together question, and then we'll let y'all go back to your days.
Yeah, I would just say for those, companies that are considering a blockchain solution, any kind of closing advice that you might have, whether it's how to address organizational inertia or how people can understand the investment that they think, is involved. It's really more about getting everybody convened and all together. But any closing advice for people considering blockchain, how to get, started.
Look at your participants, your assets, and your transactions. And if you're the only participant, you don't need blockchain.
Yeah, one of my first iPhone apps is a blockchain app, and the answer like 9 times out of 10 is no. So,
I think one of the things I'll say, and I don't mean to cut you off, Frank, is don't be afraid of it. I think a lot of people immediately hear it and think it has to do with something nefarious. And it's not. In fact, it's probably just the opposite. Actually, it's much more for safety and security with your transactions and your data. So I think don't be afraid of it. It is really important. And to talk to hopefully myself, but folks like us who obviously are big champions of the technology. And I think that's the kind of thing that I think people really. It's like this fear that it's going to change their the outlook of their company and open them up to fraud or acts that are negative, and it really is not. So I think when you talk to I'm listening to Frank and Jason and Karen talk. I mean, there's people with a lot of knowledge that are very much behind the technology that are champions for lack of a better term, and we understand the positive impacts that it can have.
I would say too, my advice is always to model, because push data through what you're trying to do, because data behaves in weird ways, so does bacon. And so, but I think that when I start showing people things, I actually want to show them their contract. I want to show them their data doing stuff, so they really understand what we're talking about here. That here's what a blockchain looks like. Really, you can't see your name in there. You know what I mean? It's like, that's what I find is helpful, and that's what I love about IBM Blockchain, is because it basically allows me to do that without a huge test net setup. I can basically run it on my Ubuntu laptop if I want to, and just show people cool stuff. So.
And to Karen's point, definitely bring in, your partners, your clients, and figure out what the appropriate use case is. Because if you're the only one using it, then it's probably not a good use case for blockchain.
Well, champions and Debbie and Luke behind the scenes at the moment, thank you so much. This was I knew this was going to be a good conversation. We didn't get to some of the questions that both I had for you guys, for you all, and that some of our listeners had. So what I'm going to propose is that I will start a discussion at ibm.biz/champions, which is our community site. And the champions who are here can drop in. I'll bring the questions from the external sites, and I'll put all the links. And once I start that discussion there, anyone who is sort of trying to follow this conversation even after the live stream is done, when it's just recorded, can jump in there, meet these champions and others, and we'll share some of these links of things our champions spoke about, some of the use cases that IBM Developer has, and just kind of extend this conversation, because I know we're not done. We're going to have a blockchain V2 coming up here for a future live stream as well. So
Excellent.
thank you all so much. You're great conversationalists and super experts, and I'm so glad to have you here. Debbie, thank you for helping us bring this all together and making sure we had the right questions and the right people in the rooms. I can't say in the room because we're distributed, but
decentralized.
We're in the virtual room where it happens, right?
we are. And Luke, thanks so much for being our producer and my co-host. And we will see you next time. Look for the next champion chat in about 2 weeks.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us.
Yep.